Hello, everyone. I'm going to be going over the reading from last week because, well, I wanted to give you some time to kind of process it on your own. And so I'll be doing kind of like a recap slash discussion of the interesting things that I took from the readings last week. But I didn't want to give it to you last week because, like I said, I wanted you to kind of uh, soak them in on your own. And I'm going to be doing this too for the other readings, like trying to let you have your own thoughts about it, and then have a discussion about it. Too, in the discussion board, and then kind of do this as kind of like a way to recap and close out the week. So let's talk about the reading. So, to be quite honest, I think that the chapters 2, 3, and 4 are more germane and interesting to the essay that we're going to be writing. So, if you don't remember, the first chapter was about the author trying to get the spam bot down. During, when he's writing this, that I think matters more, or maybe it still matters, depending on how you look at it. But then there's some there can be some I feel like when he's writing, there's a lot less confusion over who's tweeting and not tweeting, because if you're someone like the author, you would have been verified back then, and so that if there was this other account that's unverified, it's easy to tell people who's who. Actually, I think nowadays, now that Elon Musk has bought the company and there's like some debate, since like anyone can just buy a blue check mark, basically, at least as far as I know, I'm not on Twitter, that there's like some debate over like the authenticity of people, like who's actually tweeting. But when he's writing this, I can see how it would be an annoyance that there's some other version of you in the internet out there saying things that you aren't saying. But at the end of the day, I think that in terms of like publicly shaming, it almost kind of doesn't even really relate to the topic. By the way, side note, interesting short story idea out there for you all. Maybe you can write about like a AI that is doing, is tasked to do tweets of famous celebrities, dead or alive or something. I don't know. You can write that screenplay. Anyway, let's talk about chapters 2, 3, and 4, because I feel like those are way more interesting and also relate to this topic a lot more. So, if you remember, the topic of this essay is looking at kind of the pros and cons of public shaming. And so that you can have an argument that's nuanced and basically saying that there are benefits and consequences to public shaming, and maybe you think that it's equal, kind of evens each other out, or maybe you think that there are more consequences or perhaps benefits to public shaming. Okay, so when we look at chapters 2, 3, and 4, I think the author really kind of presents us with both the benefits and consequences of public shaming, but really doesn't do in such a way that it editorializes it, where it's like basically like saying like, oh, this person, Jonah Lehrer, he got his comeuppance, or Justine Sacco, she should be punished this way. And so I think he kind of refrains from editorializing, which I think in our case is really good, because it provides us with the opportunity to basically be able to decide who's kind of in the right or wrong. So let's start with Jonah Lehrer. I'm going to kind of go back to my notes on him. So what I think is really interesting about these two chapters is basically we really see both the pros and cons, I think, kind of really laid out about public shaming. And so I thought when we're looking at these two chapters, it might be kind of interesting to kind of look at it from those perspectives. So let's look at the pro. Well, Jonah Lehrer, the author, he's not plagiarizing, right? Really, he's inventing. And inventing things as a journalist is not what you want to do. Fiction writers, you can or we can invent all the things we want, but if you're a journalist, you gotta stick to the facts. So what Jonah Lehrer is basically doing is making up quotes to kind of suit the needs of what he wants to say, and especially since he's I would kind of classify him in this like kind of pseudoscience, not really pseudoscience, but kind of like science light, where it's like, he's writing about science and these scientific things, but he's kind of doing it in a way, he's writing it for an audience that's not really familiar with these topics. So he's like kind of bringing it to the general public, right? These really complex scientific topics. A side note, I used to use one of his articles in my English 101, and I had to change that after I read this book, because I was worried about, kind of the things that he's accused of. So anyway, Jonah Lehrer is basically discovered to have made up things. And that's problematic, and you can see how he's really trying to, kind of throw his weight around in the beginning, and then, is like kind of begging and pleading with this reporter at the end. But the net result is that his career is destroyed. I dare say life, but definitely his career. I don't know about you, but I did a little Googling after I read this chapter, and wanted to see kind of what he was up to, and it's not really much, and so you can see how his credibility was destroyed because of this exposure. And so I think, if you're looking at it from a pro perspective, in a lot of ways, you can see kind of the benefits of public shaming here, because it prevents not only Jonah Lehrer, but maybe others from wanting to do this. Because what he did, I think it's really significant, because if we're reading something in like the New Yorker, and it's presented as this sort of science fact, and then we've come to find out later that it's really distorted and altered, that's going to undermine our sort of feelings and the integrity of the publications. And so, now does it mean that he should lose his, career? That's up for you to decide. But I think that this kind of does show the pros, so to speak, of public shaming, where it brings to light these sort of actions that are not exactly ethical. And the cons here, I think, are obvious. He lost his career. That sucks. Nobody would want to lose their career this way. I do think the consequences of this type of public shaming is that it might threaten other people. But again, I think you can maybe kind of look at that as like, hey, you know what? If you do the crime, you got to do the time type of thing. So, in this case, I definitely think one of the interesting things is that, we feel the humanity of Jonah Lehrer. And there's that quote, and excuse me for swearing here, but he says, the shaming process is fucking brutal. And we feel how kind of, human he is in this moment. And it's like, you really can't help feel sorry for the person, even though basically everything he did, he's caused. Like, he's the reason, that these things happen. It's not like he's just some innocent. So I just really think it's interesting here, and it really kind of brings into question, the extent to which public shaming is in our culture now. It's sort of like, well, how far should we take these things, and is there a road back for someone like Jonah Lehrer? Now, Jonah Lehrer's example, I think, might exude, kind of give us a little bit of like pathos, and might feel sorry for the person. Justine Sacco, though, is, I think, a different example than Jonah Lehrer. The amount of empathy we might have for her, I think, is a lot less. So let's talk about her case. I don't know if you remember this. I do. It was kind of at the time when she tweeted this. It was like kind of a big news story, not like a big news story, but I think it was a popular thing to talk about both online and in the news because of how it's sort of basically showed how a average person can be impacted in a public forum. So again, what happened? What's going on again? So just to remind you, Justine Sacco, who is like a PR person, and had only 170 followers on Twitter. Like, look, I have more followers than that on Instagram. Not to brag. No, I'm joking, but I do. So she basically tweets to a very small amount of people, and she's going to London to Cape Town, and she says something incredibly racist, and she doesn't have any sort of internet on the flight, and when she gets there, it's just kind of like blown up into this huge sort of news story. And so I think, again, what we kind of see here is, just like with the Jonah Lehrer case, a little bit of like Schadenfreude, where we're looking at this and like saying, hey, you did a bad thing and you should get punished. And I think in the Jonah Lehrer case, we might, like I said, we might feel a little bit of empathy for him, because it's like, got to maybe get on his head. You can kind of make excuses for Jonah Lehrer, and and not saying they're good excuses, but I feel like that it's that we as readers might feel empathy for him, and we would give ourselves permission to feel empathy for him. But with someone like Sacco, it's like, no, like that's not okay, and what you're saying is not okay, and it's, I think, a lot harder for us to feel empathy. And really, I think the reason we might feel empathy, to be quite frank, is that we're worried that it might happen to us, that someone might see something that we said online in the past, or record something we said in person and post it online. And then that's the only reason why I think that the Justine Sacco case might kind of give us pause. But yeah, anyway, I think this again kind of shows us, right, the pros and cons of public shaming. Pro, is like when someone says something that's vile, we can look at that person and say, no, like that's not cool. You can't do that. And that person can maybe grow and learn from that. And so that's a benefit of public shaming, I think, here. The consequences are, it's not like she's just like, the public at large is like, hey, what you said is really bad, and this is why it's bad. And it's like, okay, I didn't realize that. I'll just kind of go on my way. Maybe I'll read a couple books or something. Sure, again, like Jonah Lehrer, her career is kind of gone, right? And her credibility is gone. So I guess the question, really is, what is the path back And is there a path back? And should there be a path back for someone like Sacco or Jonah Lehrer even? And so I think it just kind of raises interesting questions, right? In terms of the whole pros and cons of this, right? Where, like, I think there's one way you can look at these two stories and say, these two folks did something reprehensible and they got what they deserved, and that is that, right? And the reason they got what they deserved is because of the public's reaction to them and then the shaming that came afterwards, right? And there's maybe another way to look at this where, like, well, did they get what they deserved? Was it too much? Did public shaming go overboard? Are there, should there be degrees? Like when we look at someone like Jonah Lehrer and Sacco, their offenses are very different. So should we, give one more punishment or the other? So I think it just brings up a whole host of issues. And to be quite honest, just to and I know I'm going really long here, I think that both these cases kind of bring up an inherent fear that a lot of us have, or maybe most of us have when being online, or even if you're not online, is this notion of, like, at any moment, things I've done in the past or things I've said can be used to kind of take away what I've built, right? So I do think it's an interesting kind of, like, he's kind of focusing on, I think, a fear of modern, America. And I even hate to kind of bring it up, right? Because it's like I think something it's like people don't want to talk about because it's sort of it's such a prevalent issue. So anyway, I hope you're enjoying these readings. Like I don't know if you caught this, but I'm really trying to pick readings that I think are applicable and give us something to talk about and research that in terms of, like, the society around us and what's happening around us. And so I think that both of these examples with Lehrer and Sacco give us a really interesting insight into what's happening in contemporary America. All right, so that's chapters 1 through 4. I look forward to discussing the rest of the book with you, and I really am interested to see your perspective on this because, like I said, this is, to me, very open-ended and can generate a lot of different responses in terms of the consequences or benefits of public shaming. So I'm really interested to hear your thoughts about this matter. All right, take care, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye.